want to remind everybody about the microphones.
Well, I'm sure. Maybe a little too deep.
In the name of the God who created us, in the name of the Christ who teaches us, in the name of the Spirit who journeys alongside us throughout our lives, welcome home, children of God. Peace be with you. Good morning and welcome to First Presbyterian Church this morning as we gather together as God's people in God's name. It is wonderful to be together this morning. Welcome all of you here. Thank you for being a part of this worship service, whether you're joining us online or here in person. It's so good to see you this morning. If you're here, would you please take just a quick moment and sign in on the blue friendship pads. If you're joining online, would you please just sign in on the YouTube chat. Again, we ask everybody to do this so that we can tally up all the people that are worshiping with us in person and online and give $1 to a local or an international ministry. There's a misprint in your bulletin. It says today is Shepherd's Inn. That was last week. You don't get 2 Sundays in a row, Paul, sorry. Today is actually a 4th Sunday of the month. which means that today's recipient is Living Waters for the World. It is a really fantastic ministry that's a joint project of Presbyterian churches all throughout Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Kentucky. So it's a partnership with churches all around those states that are all part of the Synod of the Living Waters. And what that ministry is they train volunteers from churches like us and other churches who volunteer to go learn how to install these clean water filtration systems, solar powered, and then go install them in communities around the world and here locally. There are a few of them here in Carter County, as well as other communities throughout East Tennessee that don't otherwise have access to clean, potable drinking water. So it's a great ministry. If you'd like to learn more about it, there's livingwatersfortheworld.org, or let me know. But otherwise, just know that your presence today helps to support that ministry. So thank you for the gift of your time this morning. 2 weeks from today, we're going to collect our one great hour sharing. That's going to be Easter Sunday. Hopefully, many of you have already picked up some fish banks. If you want to put change in there to collect it. If not, I think there's some in the back. Jim is not here this morning to promote it, so I'm trying to remember what else to tell you. But there are some brochures in the back as well about it. That is an offering collected by Presbyterian churches around the country, as well as other denominations. And you can learn more about what that supports, and you'll hear more about that, I think, next Sunday too. But that we're going to receive that in 2 weeks. Let's see. I know Rebecca's going to say a little bit more about the retreat coming up, but I have one last announcement while she's making her way up here. After several years of not doing this due to COVID, we are going to try doing Dinners for 8 again this year. So there are some forms up here. You can sign up if you would like to participate, and you can check if you are able to host one of those. If you don't know what those are, it's just we take everybody who is willing to do it, and we try to just kind of mix and match people up and have dinner at, schedule that works for everybody. They're just kind of individually scheduled. Kind of a covered dish thing. Everybody brings something to share, and you sit down and somebody will host. They are fantastic events. And you have until the end of April to sign up, so I think we're going to try to do most of these during May. But if you would like to join Dinners for 8, pick up one of these forms and sign them in. You can drop them in the offering plate. Suzanne Moody, I don't think is here this morning. I don't see her. But she's going to be coordinating all that, so she would be a better one to ask questions to than me. But sign up. We'll put these up here. Dinners for 8. Rebecca, you want to tell us about the retreat?
Sure. Okay. So you've heard for a couple of weeks that Covenant Presbyterian decided to invite Watauga, Jonesboro, First Presbyterian Elizabethton, the Cool Church, to join. I didn't say that in front of them. To join them for retreat. So there is a notion that First Presbyterian Elizabethton doesn't know how to have fun. So I'm hoping that you can help me break that notion by going to the retreat, because the purpose is celebrating curiosity and to play. So there is an option to come for the day. $25 will buy you lunch and dinner. You can come for the weekend and have a room to spend the night. 2 nights, $150. Meals starting Friday night, all day Saturday, and Sunday lunch you're on your own. But so to make it easy for you, we have created a clipboard, and it says, yes, I'm coming Sunday, and I'm asking for your name and your phone number. If you would like to fill out the registration page, and especially to ask for kayaking or zip line, you need to fill out one of these so they can be sure they have appropriate people to help us, like save your life if you fall in the lake. So you would need to fill this out so we have lifeguards and such. There's also an information here if you just can't be bothered to do that this morning and you want to do it at home online, there's websites here. But today, the rub, the downside, today is your last day to register. So I hope that's not an automatic, well, forget it. Please come. Please help us dispel that myth that First Pres can't have fun. Okay, we're going to show them how to do it. But, and it's our camp. It's a beautiful camp. There's a service project involved. We're going to have a great time, games, worship, prayer, fires, s'mores, you know, all the things you do at camp. And I think that you'll, if you haven't been to Holston Presbyterian Camp before, it's in Banner Elk, and you need to go. It's really a spectacular place and an incredible blessing that we have that so close here in our presbytery. It's actually just outside, but okay, so passing the clipboard. Most of you have done this before. Do not let the clipboard stop. You might have to get up. We're kind of sparse to pass it today, but you know, get up, pass it all the way to the back, all the way to the front. Okay, please, please, please come join us. And before I take the clipboard down, I want to let you know, because I don't think anybody's here to make this announcement for the Peacemaking Committee, but there are out-of-town speakers coming in today. This is something that's sponsored by the Peacemaking, Jenny, URI, somebody else in here, Irwin, Citizen Awareness and Network. People's Hearing for Nuclear Awareness. It's going to be this afternoon, Johnson City Public Library, 2 to 5. And you know, if they come from out of town, they're really good speakers, right? But anyway, I'm sorry, don't mean to be disrespectful. But, you know, if you can make it, I think this would really be worthwhile. So I'll be there. Okay, is that it? I can sit down now? Okay.
You can sit down. Thank you, Rebecca. No comment. Any additional joys or concerns or announcements? Then, friends, let me again say the words of welcome that we say every Sunday here, which is just to remind us all that God loves us all and all people without condition and without exception, because in our rich and beautiful diversity, we all reflect the image of God. And God's image is lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, straight, male, female, non-binary. God's image is black, brown, white, Asian, indigenous. God's image welcomes lovingly our belief or unbelief, our exploration of the richness of human knowledge found in science and diverse religious and spiritual traditions. God's love welcomes us, whether we are rich or poor, young or old, able-bodied or disabled, suffering or rejoicing, because God's image and God's love are broad and expansive and welcome all people without condition and without exception. We give thanks today for the ancestral Cherokee land on which we are gathered, and for the loving waters of the Watauga and Doe River watersheds that nourish us. As we continue our time of worship, we pledge ourselves to work for truth and reconciliation among all peoples, and respect for creation and for one another in all we say and do. So let us worship.
Morning. Before I read the invitation to worship, I want you to know there is a story behind it, and it's on the back of your bulletin. This poem is taken from a collection of poems about Mary Magdalene. So I will start, and you join me when we come to the bold lines. The failure of love might account for most of the suffering in the world. The girl was going over her global studies homework in the air, where she drew the map with her finger touching the Gobi Desert, the plateau of Tiber in front of her. And looking through her transparent map backwards, I did suddenly see how her left is my right, and for a moment I understood. Please rise as you're able, and we will sing hymn number 326.
No, you're right. The number's wrong, Pat, though. It's misprinted in the bulletin. The number is 201. The hymn title's correct. So, but thank you for announcing that. Let us take a moment. I love the cheers. You're going to love the rest of the service then, I hope. Let's take a moment and share the peace of Christ with one another. Greet one another in whatever way you are comfortable doing. In pandemic, if you're online, please enjoy the slideshow of friendly, smiling faces. Peace be with you.
I'm gonna put it on the newsletter
meant to add about the retreat. It's the weekend after Easter, and if you're watching online and you are planning to attend or you'd like to attend, please make a note in the YouTube comments, and Tristan will get it to me. Okay, thank you. So it's time for our meditation. I invite you to scoot back in your seat, sitting straight, feet on the floor, finding that place that says to your body, it's time to be still. And hopefully our minds will listen. Noticing your breath. Feeling your weight, gravity, holding you close. I invite you to join me and take a minute to pause and let those people that you are grateful for come to mind. For me, first, it's the people who love me. Just the way I am. Not nearly perfect. But embraced by their love nonetheless. And I invite you to let those faces surround you, because there isn't just one. It may be a small glance exchanged with a stranger. Someone you've known all your life. Someone you've just met. In your own way, shower them with your gratitude and return their kindness. Now let's take a minute to look at the world around us. From the tiny to the grand. The northern lights have come to visit our neck of the woods. Their magnificent beauty in the sky. The tiniest of wildflowers at our feet. No matter the state of our front yard. The beauty of this creation. The creation of which we are a part. As magnificent as the mountains are, so are you. breathing that breath that breathes us, literally, that gives us life. That brings us home. And I invite you to stretch just a little bit, to be grateful for the challenges that we find, that come to us, that slap us in the face, the opportunities we have to love somebody who's not so lovable, to step up, to speak out, to learn about what earth needs. And to find how we might make a difference in small ways, and together, maybe big ways. You do make a difference. That's how our Creator lives today. Through our breath, through our love, through our voices. Pachamama, Gaia, Mother Earth, Earth. You are home. You are source. You are lavish generosity and callous disregard. You summon us to relationship, not dominion. May our eyes, ears, minds, and hearts open to your call. Blessed be.
Our reading is from John chapter 11. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." As Jesus journeyed to Bethany, Lazarus died and was laid in a tomb there. Jesus said to Martha, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" Martha said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what he had done.
Thank you, Cody. That was beautiful. That was Scared So by C. Webster, by the way. And Pat, thank you for reading this morning. Rebecca, thank you for that meditation, especially today. When I was in, I think, 6th grade and finished confirmation class, we were each given as kind of a gift for completing confirmation class, a Bible and a bookmark. The bookmarks were, I imagine, all from just the local Christian bookstore, but each one of them had Proverbs 22:1 on it, a verse that reads, "A good name is rather to be chosen than great riches," and then they had your name at the top of it and then what your name was supposed to mean. I don't know why that gift stuck with me for so long. I had that bookmark for many years after confirmation, probably well into college, grad school, I don't know. But I've had that bookmark for a long time and it stuck with me. And I share that because names were such an important part of identity in Jesus' day, just like they are in ours. But when it comes to names in the Bible, they're a little bit trickier to follow. To begin with, most people in the Bible did not have a surname, didn't have a last name. And so they were distinguished from other people with the same name by some kind of identifying descriptor, like maybe where they were from or what they did for a living. So you might say, this is Bob from Bristol, to distinguish him from Bob from Elizabethton. Or you might refer to me as, Brian the handsome and erudite preacher. Why is that funny? It's not a joke. To distinguish me from Brian the carpenter or, Brian the accountant or something, right? And I mentioned all of that this morning because we have a story about Mary. And we encounter at least 2 women in the Bible who are named Mary. So it's important to keep some of this information in mind. And I know that on first read, the story that Pat read for us this morning, it seems to be a story about Lazarus and this miraculous, resurrection from the dead, when Jesus raises Lazarus. But if you'll bear with me through a little bit of background information that is kind of important to understand, I think, I want to suggest to us this morning this story is not really about Lazarus so much as it is, in fact, a very important story about a woman named Mary. To begin with, this story is only told in John's Gospel. And it begins with the statement, a certain man, Lazarus, was ill. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And if you look down in the section Pat read, and I just excerpted parts of it so you could get the basis of the story, but it goes through this whole story, and then you look down to the last verse, and it's only Mary who is mentioned. Martha's out of the picture by then. The last verse reads, many of the Jews who came with Mary and saw what Jesus did believed in him. So what happens to Martha in this story? Why is it by the end of the story, Mary is the only one who is listed, who is named? There's a woman named Elizabeth Schrader. She goes by Libby, and she's a doctoral candidate at Duke right now, and she's working on a degree in early Christianity and New Testament. Starting in the fall, she's going to be an assistant professor at Villanova. And her doctoral thesis is on this chapter, chapter 11 of John. Now, there's a document called Papyrus 66. And Papyrus 66 is a near-complete codex of the Gospel of John. It's one of the oldest New Testament manuscripts known to exist, and it dates back to around 200 CE. So Libby starts her doctoral work digging into this chapter of John. And in particular, she's looking at Papyrus 66 and what this has to say about John 11, or its account of John 11. And Libby noticed something. She noticed something really odd in the first verse. In that manuscript, as she's looking at it on the computer and zooming way in, because they're all digitized, he zooms in and looks very closely and notices that the first verse actually reads, now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary, and his sister Mary. And Libby said to herself, what? That's not what my English Bible says. My Bible says, now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. But the Greek text, in fact, the oldest Greek text that we have in the world of John, doesn't say that. Here in Papyrus 66, the oldest Greek text in the world that we have says, now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary, and his sister Mary. So now it sounds kind of like there are two people named Mary, and not somebody named Martha after all. So what happened? And that's the question that Libby took to exploring. And in doing so, Libby noticed something that no other New Testament scholar had ever noticed. In the text, the second time Mary's name was listed had actually been changed. And she could see in the text the correction when she zoomed in and looked at it. So how does that happen? In Greek, the name Mary is Maria, M-A-R-I-A, for the English letters of that. But that I is the Greek letter iota. It looks like our I, right? And she zoomed in and she noticed that somebody had written over that I the Greek letter theta. So, M-A-R-I-A became M-A-R-T-H-A. Maria becomes Martha. Somebody had gone back to that original manuscript and written over the original text to change Mary into Martha. And they also changed his sister Mary, to her to make the sentence read as though there were two women, Mary and Martha, and they're both sisters of Lazarus. Now, admittedly, the original text reads kind of confusingly, unless the author was trying to specify which Mary he was talking about. This Mary from Bethany, Mary the brother of Lazarus, which again would have been a very typical way of distinguishing which Mary he was talking about. And so as Libby thought about this, the realization dawned on her that sometime in the 4th century, someone had altered the oldest text of the Gospel of John and split the character of Mary into two people, so that Mary became Mary and Martha. And Libby starts going through the whole manuscript of John 11 and John 12, and she discovered that the same change had been made over and over again. Every time that Maria shows up, somebody had scribbled a theta over the iota and turned Maria into Martha. Repeatedly, she could see this zooming in on the text. And so she writes about this, writes an article, and that article is first picked up by Harvard Divinity School. And the Harvard Divinity School, in their journal, published an excerpt of her work, which is the first time I read about her. But it went beyond that, because an article in a divinity school journal can get missed by a lot of people. Who else here has a subscription to a Harvard Divinity School journal? I'm not seeing any hands in here. So, yeah, easily overlooked, right? But it goes beyond that, because that article then caught the attention of the preeminent organization of Greek scholars in the world, the Nestle-Aland Translation Committee in Germany. And I actually this is my Nestle-Aland Bible from seminary. These are the people who have gone through every Greek manuscript known to exist of New Testament texts, made a Bible out of it, and then put footnotes at the bottom of every page telling you every textual variation there is, every question about any text, everything. These are the people who know the Greek text better than anybody. They'd never noticed this, but they picked up on Libby's discovery. And so they brought her to Germany. And they asked Libby to present her research. And over the course of a couple of days, they listen to her and they look at the evidence that she's compiled. And they say, well, how about that? We might need to change something here. We might need to change the text of the Bible. Now, lest we dismiss Libby's discovery as just an anomaly, it is just one manuscript after all, right? It's just Papyrus 66, even though it is one of the oldest one, or the oldest ones we have. But around that same time, in the year 200, there's an early church writer named Tertullian. And I don't recommend you read anything by him. He's one of the most misogynistic church writers there is. But he's got a commentary on John. And he's writing on this verse. And he writes this phrase. He says, Mary confessed him, Jesus, to be the Son of God. You catch that, what Tertullian wrote? In verse 27 of what Pat read this morning, that confession is given to Martha, not to Mary. But here's a church father writing in 200 CE who attributes that confession to Mary, not to Martha. And there are some other early sources dating about the same time that comment on this text as well, with no mention of Martha. So why does any of this matter for anything more than a curiosity? If you'll bear with me, I promise we're going somewhere with this. The confession of who Jesus is. This is considered one of the most important lines in the whole Gospel of John. In the 4 Gospels that we have in our Bible, there are 2 people who utter a confession of who Jesus is. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the person who utters that confession is Peter. Peter and Jesus are having a conversation, and Jesus asks Peter, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "Well, you're the Messiah. You're the Son of God." And Jesus then turns to Peter and he says, "You are Peter. Upon this rock I will build my church." Peter the rock, right? We've probably heard that story. The other person who confesses Jesus as the Messiah, the only other time this happens in the 4 Gospels, is right here in John chapter 11. For 1,600 or more years, that confession of who Jesus is was given to a character named Martha, who doesn't appear in any other gospel and who is a relatively minor character in John apart from this one chapter. After this, she's gone from the story. She's even gone from the story by the end of the story. So here's the question. Why would someone want to take this confession from Mary and give it to a character, a made-up character named Martha, to say it instead? There are two Marys who play an important role in the Gospels. One is Mary, the mother of Jesus. The other is Mary Magdalene, who is almost certainly the Mary of this story that we heard this morning. In fact, that ties in with the rest of John's narrative later on for the rest of John's Gospel. In chapter 11, Lazarus is raised from the dead, and who is there but Mary Magdalene, who confesses Jesus as the Son of God? If we look 10 chapters later in John's Gospel to the resurrection, who's the person at the grave? It's Mary Magdalene. At first, she mistakes Jesus for the gardener, and he speaks her name, and then she turns and acknowledges him and says, Lord. So back to how people were named. This Mary in John 11 is from Bethany. Mary Magdalene is often translated in other Bibles. If you read different English translations, you'll hear her translated as Mary from Magdala. Anybody heard that? Mary Magdalene is Mary being from Magdala. As though this were Mary from the village of Magdala, not from Bethany. Except that there does not seem to have ever been a town of Magdala. Not in any maps, not in any writings from the first centuries. But there is an Aramaic word, Magdala. And in Aramaic, the word Magdala means tower. While people were sometimes identified as the town from which they came, they were also identified by other descriptors, right? Joseph the carpenter. So if Magdala is not a town, doesn't seem to have existed, but it is an Aramaic word that means tower. Let me propose something, if you have been patient enough to bear with me up to this point. Because here's where I think this all comes together. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus and Peter had this discussion. And Peter utters this confession of who Jesus is. And as a result, Jesus says to Peter, "You are the rock." In the Gospel of John, Mary and Jesus have a conversation. And Mary utters a confession of who Jesus is. And as a result, Jesus says to Mary, "You are Mary, the tower." If we take these two confessions together, then Peter and Mary become twin pillars in the Jesus movement in the early church. Two people who both understood how special and unique Jesus was when others did not see it. Two people to whom Jesus gives titles and special recognition: the rock and the tower. But the John account was changed. The John story has been hidden from view. And I don't mean this to sound like a Dan Brown novel or conspiracy theory. We know that manuscripts got changed and they were hand-copied over and over until the invention of the printing press. But in this case, the oldest manuscript we have, and other writings from the same period, all seem to give to Mary the tower these words of confession. And I'll note again that Libby's discovery has been deemed credible by the authoritative group of New Testament scholars in the world. So why go into all of this? It's not just because I find it fascinating, though I really do. But I think the church is experiencing a time of massive transformation. The late Phyllis Tickle suggested that this happens once about every 500 years or so in Judeo-Christian history. She called it the Great Rummage Sale, where the church gets rid of the cruft and reclaims the kernels of value. And if she's correct in her assessment, and I both believe and hope that she is, then the church is in a period of evolving into something new. We're 500 years since the Reformation, and we're at that period of history in which that would happen. And as we do, here's this discovery that the early church, the church closest to Jesus, and for at least a couple of centuries after him, that church may not have been as patriarchal as the one we've inherited. It may have been that the early church viewed Peter and Mary in twin roles, women and men together as partners and pillars of faith. Diana Butler Bass shared a sermon on this very discovery at the Wild Goose Festival last summer that I attended. And much of the sermon is kind of indebted to her work as she thought about this. So she posed two questions for consideration, and I'll repeat them here because I believe they might help us to ignite our thinking, our imagination, our hope for the future of the church as we take part in this inevitable and timely evolution. So she asks, what if the other story of Mary hadn't been hidden? What if we'd known about Mary the Tower all along? What kind of Christianity would we have if the faith and the church hadn't only been based upon Peter, you are the rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, but what if we had also always known, Mary, you are the tower, and by this tower we shall all stand? I think there is possibility and hope before us. It's why I'm excited to be a part of the church, this church in particular, but watching the evolution of the church in this time of transformation. Because we have an opportunity to envision and build a church that looks different, perhaps, and is able to reclaim some more of the mutuality and vitality of this woman of towering faith, who saw in Jesus the power to bring forth resurrection and life out of darkness and death. I don't know what that future will look like. None of us do. But I'm really excited to work toward it and discover it together. I hope you are as well. So blessed be. Amen. Come to that time of offering in the service, and so let me invite us in joy and gratitude to celebrate the gifts and the blessings that we have as we share some of that to help build the kingdom of God that Peter the rock and Mary the tower envisioned and worked for as we share our gifts. Let us receive our tithes and offerings. invite us to remain standing in body or spirit as we're able. Our closing hymn is called "There Is a Line of Women." It's a public domain tune, but the text comes out of the Iona community in Scotland, and you'll find the words in your bulletin and on your screen, so let's sing along. So my charge to all of us as we go from here, this story started as an obscure piece of information in a divinity journal from a doctoral student. But for 1,600 years, we thought one thing, and now we're discovering something completely new. And so I guess my encouragement to myself and all of us is always be on the lookout for new information, new ways of thinking, ways of seeing things differently than we've always done, even if we've seen it that way for 1,600 years. Because there's always new possibility, and in new possibility is hope for our future together. So let me invite us to circle up and join hearts or hands or whatever you feel comfortable doing in COVID, and we'll sing our benediction to one another. The words are in your bulletin if you need them. The words are on the screen as well. Tristan, I've added a slide. I don't know if y'all found it, but all right, thanks for the thumbs up, Nico. We'll sing our benediction together as we